There's a silent exhaustion that comes from living your life through the expectations of others. A fatigue that doesn't stem from hard work, but from the constant contortion of your own identity to win the approval, affection, or validation of people who may never truly understand you. People-pleasing isn't kindness, it's self-betrayal dressed as virtue. And the Stoics would see it as the slow erosion of one's character, the watering down of the soul in exchange for fleeting applause. But to free yourself from this pattern, you don't need to become selfish. You need to become whole. You need to stop bleeding energy into every request, every awkward favor, every moment where your yes is whispered out of guilt rather than truth. The first step to reclaiming your life is to understand why you gave it away in the first place. Most people-pleasers don't realize the depth of their fear. It is not that they enjoy being accommodating, it's that they are terrified of being disliked, abandoned, or seen as difficult. Somewhere in their past, approval became a form of currency, something earned, not given freely. And so their self-worth became tethered to how useful or agreeable they were to others. The child who was praised for being easy grows into the adult who says yes while screaming no inside. The Stoics, who valued reason above reaction, would urge us to slow down and investigate this fear. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. If you fear disapproval, it's not the disapproval itself that harms you, but the story you've told yourself about what it means. That you're not enough. That you must earn your place. But what if you are enough even when you say no? What if your value is not tied to how much you do for others, but who you are in silence? This shift begins with self-awareness. It begins when you notice the moment your heart races at the idea of disappointing someone. When you recognize the tension in your stomach before replying to a message. When you realize that your yes is not coming from peace but from panic. You cannot begin to reclaim your time, your energy, or your dignity until you understand the fear that's been running the show. People-pleasing thrives in unconsciousness. It feeds on autopilot behaviors. So the first Stoic practice is to pause, to observe, to ask, what am I afraid will happen if I honor my truth in this moment? Then listen, not to the noise of the world, but to the quiet wisdom of your conscience. Self-respect begins when you stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of everyone else's comfort. And while it might feel like an earthquake the first time you say, no, know this, the people who love the real you will stay. The ones who loved your compliance will fall away, and that's not loss. That's liberation. What you're doing is not rejecting people. You're refusing to reject yourself. And that changes everything. After recognizing the hidden fears beneath people-pleasing, the next crucial step is to erect something powerful. Boundaries. Not as walls to isolate you from the world, but as clear, healthy lines that define where you end and others begin. Without boundaries, you are a sponge, soaking up everyone's wants, moods, expectations. With boundaries, you become a vessel, holding space for others but not at the cost of leaking your own soul. Boundaries are not selfish. They are acts of self-respect. And they are essential for peace. A Stoic does not live for the approval of the crowd. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's because truth, especially personal truth, is often misread by people who have grown used to your silence. When you begin to honor your own voice, some will resent the loss of control. But this resistance is not your burden, it is theirs. Think about the people you respect the most. Chances are they have boundaries. You admire them not because they always say yes, but because their yes means something. They have standards. And when they give of themselves, you know it's sincere. Boundaries are what make generosity real. Without them, your giving becomes performative, an attempt to avoid discomfort or rejection, not a choice rooted in love or conviction. So how do you begin setting boundaries when you've spent a lifetime erasing them? Start with clarity. Know your limits. What drains you? What crosses the line? What kinds of requests make you feel bitter, tense, or fake? These are the areas where boundaries are missing. You can't set a boundary you haven't first defined for yourself. Take time to identify what your non-negotiables are, the lines you will no longer allow to be crossed, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Next, speak simply. A boundary does not require an essay. You don't need to explain your entire history or justify your fatigue. A simple, calm, I'm not available for that, is enough. Or, that doesn't work for me right now. Or even just, no, these are not attacks, they are declarations of self-respect. And when spoken from a grounded place, they carry weight. Will some people react poorly? Absolutely. Especially those who benefited from your lack of boundaries. But their discomfort is part of their growth, not your guilt. If someone can only love you when you're agreeable, it's not love, it's a transaction. You may fear that boundaries will push people away. But here's the paradox. The right boundaries draw the right people closer. When you live in integrity, those who resonate with your truth will feel safe around you, not because you always please them, but because they know where you stand. Consistency builds trust. And trust is the bedrock of every meaningful relationship. Remember, people-pleasing is often about avoiding conflict. But boundaries are a form of courageous conflict, one that says, I am worth protecting. And when you start treating yourself with that kind of dignity, you stop attracting those who expect your self-abandonment as a given. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think or do, only what you do." Boundaries give you that tranquility. They allow you to care deeply, without caring destructively. And from that place, something remarkable happens. You begin to live your life not as a reaction to others, but as a response to your own values. You no longer shrink yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You expand into the fullness of who you are, firm, kind, and unapologetically real. Once you've learned to define and protect your boundaries, a deeper shift begins to take place inside you, one that reorients the very axis of your priorities. For the first time, you start asking a question that many people-pleasers avoid their entire lives. What do I need? And for many, the silence that follows this question is deafening. Because the people-pleaser has spent so long tuning their emotional frequency to the needs of others, their own desires have become faint whispers beneath layers of guilt, anxiety, and social programming. But that silence is not a dead end. It's an invitation. The Stoics remind us again and again, a good life starts with self-governance. To be useful to others, you must first be useful to yourself. You must honor your needs, not as acts of egoism but as acts of strength. Prioritizing your well-being is not a betrayal of others. It is the very foundation that allows you to serve them authentically. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And yet how often do we try? There's a reason airplanes tell you to put on your own oxygen mask before helping someone else. Without breath, you are of no use to anyone. Without rest, without clarity, without inner alignment, your presence becomes hollow, your giving becomes forced, and your kindness becomes brittle. Real service comes from overflow, not depletion. So how do we begin the work of prioritizing our needs without drowning in guilt? Start by reframing the narrative. Taking care of yourself is not selfish, it's strategic. When you sleep better, you listen better. When you're emotionally nourished, you're more patient, more creative, more present. When your life is in balance, your contributions to the lives of others become gifts, not obligations. You also begin to realize that not every request is an emergency. Many people-pleasers operate from a false urgency, the feeling that saying no, or not right now, is a moral failure. But it's not. It's discernment. It's recognizing that your energy is not infinite, and that you must choose wisely where to place it. And here's the truth few will admit. If you don't prioritize your needs, someone else will prioritize them for you, and not necessarily with your best interest in mind. This is where defining your personal values becomes essential. When you know what matters to you, you stop getting pulled into 1,000 directions by what matters to others. You learn to say yes when it aligns with your soul and no when it doesn't. That clarity turns every decision into a reflection of your inner compass, rather than a desperate attempt to gain approval. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple, direct, powerful. That is what it means to live by values. It means creating a hierarchy of importance in your life, where your time, energy, and attention serve your highest purpose, not your deepest fears. You start to realize that saying no to others is often a yes to yourself. A yes to your health. A yes to your creativity. A yes to peace, to purpose, to rest. And this yes becomes sacred, especially for those who have spent their lives trapped in the reflex of accommodation. As you live more aligned with your own needs and values, an unexpected strength emerges. Self-trust. You begin to believe in your own decisions not because they please others, but because they honor your truth. And that, more than anything, silences the inner critic that once demanded you bend, stretch, or contort to keep others happy. The Stoics didn't teach us to be cold, they taught us to be clear. When you prioritize your needs and live by your values, you don't become selfish. You become whole. And in that wholeness, you offer the world your best self, not the exhausted, fragmented version that people-pleasing once created. Because you can't help others rise if you are always collapsing beneath them. There comes a moment in the journey of every recovering people-pleaser where the surface level changes, saying no more often, drawing clearer boundaries, asserting personal needs, are no longer enough. Because deeper down there's still a fear. A fear that pushes you to over-apologize, over-explain, and over-accommodate. A fear that says, if I don't please them, I might lose them. And that's why the next phase of transformation is this: learning how to handle conflict without fear. Stoicism doesn't teach us to avoid conflict. It teaches us to face it with reason, control, and principle. When you fear disagreement, you surrender your truth. When you fear upsetting others, you sacrifice your peace. But when you face conflict with integrity, you grow, not only in strength but in dignity. So many people see conflict as inherently negative, a rupture to be smoothed over at all costs. But that belief is false. In truth, conflict is data. It reveals what matters to you. It exposes the limits of others. It teaches you where your voice trembles and where it should be firmer. Seneca wrote, "You act like mortals in all that you fear, and like immortals in all that you desire." We fear the judgment of others as though it holds eternal weight. But most people's opinions are fleeting. The impact of your own decisions, however, endures. So how do we stop fearing confrontation? First, we must stop equating disagreement with disconnection. You can disagree with someone and still love them. You can say no and still be kind. You can assert your truth without attacking theirs. Conflict handled well is not the end of a relationship. It's often the beginning of a more honest one. Second, approach every conflict with values, not emotion. Instead of reacting out of frustration or guilt, speak from your principles. Instead of defending yourself with excuses, explain your boundaries with clarity. Emotion clouds, values illuminate. You might say, "I understand you're upset. But for me, doing this would go against what I've committed to." That sentence holds the strength of 1,000 anxious apologies, and it stands tall. You don't owe anyone your compliance. What you owe is your truth, delivered with calm and courage. And the more you practice, the more your fear shrinks. Third, you must recognize the difference between guilt and growth. Guilt whispers that you've done something wrong simply by honoring yourself. Growth says, "This discomfort is part of becoming who I truly am." The guilt you feel when you disappoint others is not always a moral signal. It's often just a growing pain. Let it hurt, let it pass, and let it build you. The most powerful people are not those who seek approval at every turn, but those who stay rooted in their center, even when the ground shakes. They don't react impulsively to pressure. They choose. They think. They stand. And here's the truth few will say out loud: not everyone will like the new you. The version of you that says no, that sets limits, that chooses rest over obligation, that version may upset some people. Especially those who benefited from your old self-abandonment. But if pleasing others requires betraying yourself, it's not kindness, it's self-erasure. Your role is not to be agreeable. It's to be authentic. Your responsibility is not to keep everyone else happy. It's to live in alignment with your principles. And when you do that, the people who value you will adjust. The ones who don't, they were never truly for you to begin with. Conflict is not a curse. It's a mirror. And when you learn to look into it with honesty instead of fear, you become unshakable. By now, we've walked through the uncomfortable but liberating terrain of breaking free from the chains of people-pleasing. But here, in the final stretch, comes the hardest truth of all. No one will give you your freedom. You have to claim it. Not your boss, your partner, your parents, your friends. No matter how understanding or supportive they are, they cannot do this internal work for you. Because people-pleasing is not something others impose on you, it's something you've been silently volunteering for. Over and over again. The reason it's so hard to let go of is because at some point it felt like it worked. You avoided conflict. You felt liked. You felt safe. But that safety was a lie, a short-term fix for a long-term erosion of self. The Stoics teach us to live in accordance with nature, which means living in alignment with who we truly are, not who others expect us to be. And the essence of human nature, according to Marcus Aurelius, is reason, autonomy, and virtue, not approval, image, or accommodation. When you abandon the need to be liked, you finally begin to like yourself. And from that self-respect flows something rare, true confidence. Not the loud, boastful kind that needs constant validation, but the quiet, steady presence that says, "I know who I am. I know what I stand for. And I will not bend for the sake of applause." To reach that place, you must practice something radical, prioritizing your values over your image. The people-pleaser constantly scans the world for cues. What do they want from me? How can I avoid upsetting them? But the free person scans inward. What do I believe? What matters to me? What aligns with my deepest principles? This shift is subtle but revolutionary. You stop asking, "Will they be okay with this?" and start asking, will I be proud of this? And here's where it all comes together. Small acts of defiance become the bricks of your new life. Saying no. Pausing before agreeing. Sitting with the discomfort of being misunderstood. Letting go of the compulsive need to explain yourself. These are not just boundaries. They are spiritual armor. They protect the sacredness of who you are becoming. You won't always get it right. Old habits will whisper. Some days the urge to accommodate will feel overwhelming. That's okay. Progress isn't perfection, it's persistence. Every time you choose truth over approval, you grow. Every time you act from principle rather than fear, you strengthen your foundation. And with each choice, you build something no one can take from you. A life of integrity. A life where your yes means yes and your no means no. A life where you no longer barter your soul for smiles. A life where you are your own compass. In the end, this is what Stoicism demands of us. Not cold detachment, but courageous clarity. A life not governed by the shifting winds of others' opinions, but rooted in the stillness of our own values. So, if you've lived too long in the shadows of other people's expectations, let this be your invitation. Step into your own light. Stand firm in your truth. Choose self-respect over self-sacrifice. Because you were never born to be a mirror for others. You were born to be a fire of your own. If this spoke to you, subscribe to Stoic Way for more timeless wisdom. Comment below, what boundary are you ready to set this week, and what truth will you honor by doing it?